Reading Rainbow ran for over 20 magical seasons, introducing so many different types of books to children.
Archibald Frisbee, prove them wrong.
More than over 100 celebrities made appearances on the show, most of them as guest readers.
Read by Martin Short.
On each Reading Rainbow, LeVar would visit different places depending on the theme of the episode. This usually included interviews with pretty cool guests.
Your brother invented this? Well, the man's a genius. This is the wheel.
Now in this video, I'll be picking my top 5 favorite episodes from this magical TV show that so many have nostalgic memories of. So let's get this thing started. When LeVar is walking through a park and his meeting gets canceled for a later time, he decides to let his inner child out and have some fun.
LeVar, quit acting like a kid. Well, I say to them, no way.
Now this makes LeVar start to feel nostalgic. Well, now I'm going to take a second to mention the main book for the episode, Owen, read by guest reader.
Read by Matthew Broderick.
Owen is a cute little book about a little mouse named Owen, who is having a tough time growing up and letting go of his blanket. Now, after the book, it goes into what really makes this episode special as LeVar starts to think back to his childhood. Yeah, that's right, it's nostalgia time. First, we see him having a hard time letting go of his favorite blanket, even for just a few hours for it to be washed. Sorry, LeVar, this blanket needs to be washed. It's stinkorama.
I like the way it smells when it's dirty.
Then we see him having a hard time adjusting to a new baby sister, but he quickly gets over it.
Maybe this won't be so bad.
Then comes the best part of the episode, as we see LeVar go to his first day of kindergarten. As he's walking with his mom, of course, the first thing I noticed was his lunchbox.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
The lunchbox is, of course, what makes him his first friend at school. I mean, come on. It's Superman. Now, everything LeVar overcame in these childhood moments was with his mother, who I know inspired LeVar to love books. Each Reading Rainbow episode usually would have either LeVar interview some pretty cool guests or show you people doing some pretty cool jobs. In this one, we get to see people who make comic books for a living, as they run us viewers through the process of making a comic book, and the results are pretty cool.
Cool, let's check out the story.
I love comic books, so this just adds to an already great episode for me. Owen is a fantastic episode filled with nostalgia, black and white flashbacks, a Superman lunchbox, an awesome comic book which has LeVar in it. But you don't have to take my word for it. This Reading Rainbow Top 5 episode video will continue after this short break.
Hotline, McGruff here.
We got trouble. Will's getting picked on. Come on.
Don't take on a bully. Take off with your friends. And remember, friendship beats bullies every time.
And now, back to the video. Let's go right into the book on this episode, Humphrey the Lost Whale, which happens to be a true story about a humpback whale who took a wrong turn and ended up in the San Francisco Bay, and eventually in the Sacramento River. People came together to try to save Humphrey, and things got pretty intense. There was definitely moments of uncertainty, but when Humphrey finally makes his way under the tiny bridge and back towards his home in the ocean, the people cheered with excitement. Humphrey the Lost Whale is one of my favorite books that has ever been on Reading Rainbow. This true story is really cool. And humpback whales are one of my top 3 favorite water animals, so I just love this story all around. We even get to see actual small footage of Humphrey. Now, how cool is that?
And when he finally succeeded, everyone cheered.
Now let's get into what LeVar's up to on this episode, which is whale watching. What type of whales? Well, humpback whales, of course. And man, they show some awesome shots of the humpback whales. Just check it out.
Look!
The whale just leaped completely out into the air.
That's amazing!
Now for the cool guest that LeVar gets to interview in this episode. Cindy. That's her right there. She is a scientist that gets to study whales for a living.
No way.
The episode then goes into a heartbreaking sight of people trying to save pilot whales who have shown up on the shore by the dozens.
Weigh a ton and a half, and their body just isn't equipped to deal with that weight.
The battle was sadly lost as many pilot whales died suffering, but the story didn't end there, as 3 young pilot whales survived. They show us how they nursed them back to health and eventually released them back into the wild.
And Baby and Tag swim to join him.
This story at first crushes your heart, but by the end, your heart is filled with happiness. These are the kind of stories I live for. With an amazing book based on a true story about a lost humpback whale and an awesome special guest with LeVar whale watching to an amazing story about pilot whales, I mean, this is just a must top 5 episode for me. It even has a part about humpback whales making music, and it's pretty awesome.
Well, that's what happens to the animals in this book. Alejandro's Gift.
This book is about a lonely old man who lives out in the desert. When one day a squirrel came to his garden and suddenly he didn't feel so lonely anymore. That feeling leads him to want more desert friends to fill in his loneliness. So he decides to build a water hole for the desert animals. But at first, they don't come, but when he builds it further from his home, they start to come. And Alejandro sits and listens to the sounds of the desert animals going to the water hole, knowing that he is the one blessed from his gift. Now for the really cool part of the episode, and that starts with LeVar's location, an oasis in the middle of the desert. Now I have to say, for me, an oasis is the best place in the desert. If I was where LeVar is, I would feel at total peace. It's very beautiful. And now it's time for... Morgan is LeVar's special guest on this episode. She is a naturalist who knows everything about the desert. Morgan shows LeVar around the oasis and tells him about a tribe who live there and how they use things in the oasis to survive. Like the palm tree, which they use for its fruit, and making bowls, other utensils, and even sandals. I find it all to be very interesting.
Well, they would use the leaf of the palm as the roof of their house. It's windproof and waterproof.
It gets even better when she shows LeVar a plant they use for making medicine and tea. This one's called the 4-winged saltbush, which they use for making flour and even soap to wash their clothes. It's truly fascinating what they could do with these different plants. Now on to the most important tree to the tribe in the oasis, the mesquite tree, which they use for making their homes, bow and arrows, and the pods they grow are pretty delicious.
It's really crunchy, isn't it? And it's got a sweet flavor.
But they didn't just eat the pods in raw form. This is when Morgan shows LeVar a place they call the kitchen. This is where the women of the tribe grounded things down into flour and other things in the mortar hole. And they could also use them as little cookers. Well, that was the bodacious adventure around the Oasis with Morgan, who happens to be one of my favorite guest stars the show has ever had.
I really enjoyed this.
Me too. Thanks for coming. And don't forget some water for your Jeep.
That's right, I won't.
The most important part of the Oasis is water, so of course LeVar keeps with the subject of water and tells us about Niagara Falls. This episode checks all the boxes I want in a Reading Rainbow episode. It has a good book, the topic is cool, and the special guest is fun and interesting with a lot of cool facts. This is just a great episode all around.
When you're in a dry place like this, you realize just how precious water is.
And now it's time for... Did You Know? Did you know that there's a DVD titled LeVar's Favorites, which has LeVar's top 5 favorite episodes of Reading Rainbow on it? That's right. It looks like LeVar likes to do what I like to do, and that's figuring out what my favorite episodes are. Now I have to say, LeVar's top 5 episode list is fantastic. All 5 of the episodes are great, and I even have one of the episodes on my list, and they both happen to be in the number 2 spot. Now it is a coincidence, a very cool coincidence, but that's just what it is. So what episode is it? What episode do we both have as our second favorite Reading Rainbow episode of all time? Well, let's just get into it. On this episode, we see LeVar on a tar beach in New York City.
A tar beach is an island in the sky.
Now, this is a special episode of Reading Rainbow, and not just because the book Tar Beach is magical, but also because it has a really cool part about the George Washington Bridge.
100 feet above the water. Now that's as tall as a 40-story building.
LeVar tells us a lot of cool facts about the bridge, and they even show small clips of them building the bridge back in the 1920s. It's amazing how they built this thing without the technology that we have today. They definitely risked their lives.
Oh, I see. Here's part of it. Looks like they started on both sides of the river and met somewhere in the middle.
Another thing that makes this such a great episode is that it has a lot of cool, interesting special guests, and it starts with 3 different people who help maintain the bridge. My favorite of the 3 would have to be the crazy guy who paints the bridge, and I only say that he's crazy because I personally couldn't paint 600 feet in the air.
So it doesn't really impress me anymore. It's like an everyday situation.
Another thing I like about this episode is it shows all the great things you can do on a tar beach, like having some time to yourself, looking out at a beautiful view, having dinner with family or friends, or even planting a garden.
A rooftop can be a garden. It can be a sunny blacktop beach.
Speaking of gardens, the next special guest has a really amazing garden, and it's in a place that most of us that don't live in areas with tar beaches think about a garden being.
This is called lamb's ears, and I wish you could feel it. It's as soft as a lamb's ear.
I like her tar beach garden. It is impressive. She might be my favorite guest star of this episode.
Everybody needs a special place, and this rooftop garden is mine.
But the next guy is also a great guest. He shows us that you can use a rooftop for a passion of flying birds.
As a kid growing up in this neighborhood, they had a lot of pigeon coops on the roof.
You can tell he has a connection with the pigeons. It's like they're a part of him. And it is a beautiful sight to see the birds fly.
They're really going at it. Isn't that beautiful?
I like seeing how people are different, and this episode shows us how people use tar beaches in different ways. I also like to see how people can be the same. No matter where you live, in the country, a suburb, a small or big city, in the desert, it just doesn't matter. People seem to find a way to do the things they love. And for many, a tar beach can be that place.
Being on this tar beach inspires me to do some of my best thinking. And dreaming.
Yep, Sam the Sea Cow is my favorite Reading Rainbow episode of all time. The episode starts with LeVar at SeaWorld in Florida feeding a baby manatee, and it is adorable. Now, the book in this episode, Sam the Sea Cow, is one of my favorite children's books of all time, about a manatee whose curiosity lands him into some trouble, leaving him with a permanent scar. But that doesn't stop his curiosity, and this time he gets stuck into a sewer drain. Aw, look at that poor thing. They save Sam and take him to an aquarium to get well. But with nothing to explore, he becomes sad. But Sam's loneliness soon comes to an end when they release him back into the river where he finds other manatees and happiness. I love Sam the Sea Cow, and maybe it's because manatees are my favorite water animal of all time, or maybe it's because it's such a heartwarming story. Next, LeVar shows us some heartbreaking clips of manatees hurt by boat propellers and being stuck in man-made pipes. This just rips my heart out, but also warms it when I see the people who dedicate their lives to saving and helping the manatee.
Set, go! A manatee ambulance.
LeVar gets to do the most amazing things on this episode, and his special guest interview puts him right in the water with these fantastic mammals, who they believe are descendants of the elephant.
They're reaching with that, just very similar to an elephant would reach and grab something
With the end of his trunk.
Right.
LeVar gets to touch and feed these beautiful, gentle animals while asking questions to these very interesting guests. It's truly another magical moment on Reading Rainbow.
They seem to be just so gentle and loving.
Gentle giants.
Gentle giants is exactly what they are.
But the magic doesn't stop there, as LeVar gets to do the most amazing thing he has ever done on the show, and that is taking part in releasing a manatee back into the wild.
We got you, man. It's okay.
Being part of something like this would be a dream come true to me. It would fill my heart with a wonderful feeling. But watching LeVar, who is truly an inspiring person, be part of something so amazing is the next best thing. Now I know I've used words like heart, amazing, greatest, or my favorite when it comes to talking about this episode, but I can't help it. It's just how I feel, and I'm about to do it again. As the song on the episode Save the Manatees is the best song the series has ever had. But you don't have to take my word for it. Go watch the episode for yourself and make your own judgment. We can all still work to save beautiful, amazing animals like the manatee. It's our responsibility as humans to protect such loving, gentle creatures who have no other enemy besides man. In what other way can I express how amazing this episode is and how much I love it? I don't really know. I just know that Sam the Sea Cow will live inside my heart for the rest of my time.
Manatees have lived on this earth for millions of years.
Well, that's it. My top 5 favorite Reading Rainbow episodes. Yours may differ, and that's totally awesome. Everyone's favorite should be what they connected to or enjoyed the most. There is no right or wrong answers. I will always relate Reading Rainbow to a nostalgic feeling. It's a show I could not see an episode for 20 years, and the second I hear the intro song, a warm nostalgic feeling would come over me. LeVar had the ability to take someone like me, who had not such a good childhood, and make it a little brighter. So thank you, LeVar. You gave so much to my younger self in the darkest of times.
When you read a good book, you're the producer, the director, the actor, even the special effects magician.